the four laws of habit change. And the habit change is how do you actually create these positive habits? And it's by a guy called James Clear. Again, I really encourage people to pick up the book and go to his website, even though we're not affiliated with him. I really get a lot of value from it personally. I know you do too as well, Sam. But the 4 laws that I'm going to give you, and I'm going to try and apply it to my experience, which was particularly exercise, how I was managed to sort of lose the 14, 15 kilos in the past 6 months through these 4 key pillars. And they're 4, which is the questions you want to ask yourself if you want to form a good habit or break a bad one. How can I make it obvious? How can I make it attractive? How can I make it easy? And how can I make it satisfying? And these are the 4 key pillars. And what I want to do for the last sort of 5 minutes is actually go through what these questions mean and some really clear tools within them that you can use, and hopefully share how you can do this yourself. So Sam, I'm going to start with the first one, which is how can I make it obvious? Now, this is obvious, which is it's the classic case of out of sight, out of mind, but in front of you, in front of your mind. And the whole idea of if you're trying to create a positive habit, you need to make it so obvious it's right in your face. And a really good example of that, and you said it before, if you want to exercise, the whole idea is putting your shoes right next to your bed. It might be writing a reminder note saying exercise tomorrow. It might be putting in 4 or 5 alarms in your phone. But making it so obvious and having so many reminders become really, really clear. And to give you an example of this, it's like habit stacking, which is something that James Clear talks about in the book. And he says that if you're trying to form a new habit, look at your existing habits from the habit scorecard and actually tag one of those new habits to it.
So could you explain how do you do that?
Yeah, so I'll give you one, first, which is from brushing teeth. So the whole idea is if you want to floss, put your floss, if you will, right next to your toothbrush. And when you brush your teeth, you're more likely to see the flossing and you're more likely to do it. Again, it's a probability exercise. The same thing as we speak about with exercise. If I put my shoes next to my bed and I lay out my clothes there and I have everything there, I'm more likely to do it because it's so much easier to put on my shoes than it is to go for a run. And if you break that habit of exercise into a very linear series of sub-habits that if you complete, help you get to the point where you're actually out running on the road, that can help. And that's what works so well for me is literally I bought barbells, and I'm not saying I'm buff or anything, but I put it in my room. So I'd see it every single day. I put the pull-up bar outside, so when I'd walk, I'd see it, and I'd just do maybe 4 or 5 because it would cross my mind. So I put things in place that allowed collisions to happen where I just did that stuff and ended up exercising. So that's something really clear of making it super, super obvious so you can't ignore it. Does that kind of make sense?
Hack your environment, right? You're hacking your environment for habits.
Absolutely, through people and through structures, which leads to the second part.
Okay,
how can I make it attractive? How can I make it attractive? Which is the whole idea of this craving. You want it to be like, I want to do this. And what James talks about, which I implement, I'll talk about this in a second, is temptation coupling. And that seems really silly, but he basically says, if you want to basically combine something you do habitually with something you don't like to do. So the classic example here is you might watch a certain TV show that you love only while you're at the gym, just as an example. And if you are able to couple that and make it attractive, that is a really, really clear thing. One thing I did, which worked quite well for me because I kind of wanted to look a little bit better, is I had sort of a picture of, what a good body would look like up on my mirror. And I know that seems really silly, but it was something that looked like a picture of health. And that to me looked attractive. I was reminded, hey, that's a possible sort of identity change. It's attractive to me as well. And as I first started, to be honest with you, I didn't even try to run 30 minutes. I did literally a 2-minute run. I'd run to the bottom of the hill, I'd run up, and then I'd be done. And then I went to 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. And I started really small. And that was more attractive to me than doing a 30, 40-minute run or doing an hour gym sesh. So making it attractive to you, whether that is making it start small or big, but that is sort of the second question, if you will.
Yeah, totally. Like making it something you want to do, however you do that. Like I know personally, just not to take the spotlight a little bit, but I know personally, I always use rewards for myself. So I'll say, if I do this, then I will get a reward, and that makes me much more likely to do it.
Hold on, did you just do an if-then plan?
I might have just done an if-then plan on the fly.
I love it. And based on what you're saying, the third question comes in is how can I make it easy? And Sam, you just spoke about that before, but human beings will always take the path of least resistance. And your goal in trying to create a new habit is to reduce the friction. The higher, it's like doing high jump. It's much easier to jump over a 0.2 meter bar than it is a 2 or 3 meter bar. And so lowering the barrier to entry becomes really, really clear. So I think James Clear has a really nice quote where he says, human behavior follows the law of least effort. And so the whole idea is when you reduce the friction associated with good behaviors, when the friction is low, those are favored. But that's the whole idea of good and bad habits. You reduce the friction for good habits, you increase the friction for bad habits. And in terms of that pendulum, you're more likely to point straight to the good stuff. So that then you can basically flip it. Like, how can I make it difficult to do the bad habit? Which is a really interesting implication for all these questions, in that we're applying it to good things and good habits. But if you want to break bad habits, instead of how can I make it attractive, how do I make it unattractive? Instead of how do I make it obvious, how do I make it invisible? And
which we're going to talk about next week. Which we're going to talk about next week in addictions. I love that. Yeah, make it really easy
to actually get it done. Spot on. And then the last question, as we wrap this up, is how can I make it satisfying? And the whole idea that James Clear puts forward and how I sort of internalize it is the first 3 laws we spoke about: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy. They increase the odds of the behavior occurring, right? Because again, we're just trying to make it happen so that you actually repeat it often. Because the first time you do it, it's going to be different to the 5th time you do it. The 5th time is different to the 10th. And you start to form those habit loops because you're doing it more often. But the 4th law of behavior change, making it satisfying, increases the odds that the behavior will happen the next time, right? And that's the whole idea of repeating it. And so there's 2 really clear ways you can go about doing this. And how I did it is a habit tracker. We spoke about the Seinfeld method before. Get your calendar up. And I put it in the office. I actually put it in the office where all my colleagues could see, so that I had some accountability. My colleagues would ask, hey, correct. They'd ask, hey, Kieran, what's that about? I'd have to tell them. And I would be ticking this off. And the 2 that I was tracking was whether no alcohol and was actually going and exercising. And I remember I had a cross in the calendar for orange, cross that was orange was for exercise, and a plus sign in purple was for not drinking. And what you find very clearly is it's quite satisfying to tick things off. And what's even more satisfying is when people come and say, hey, Kieran, great job. You're 13 days, 14 days. I had 2 colleagues actually now put it up for them. And it started to create, as we said, an accountability partnership, which means that you have redundancy in your model. Instead of relying on yourself and your willpower to get stuff done, you start to have a network of 3 or 4 people who would actually hold each other accountable. And that's the whole idea that becomes really clear. And I would say this is the massive thing that got me to do it again, that habit tracker, and then having people in the office, my colleagues who I respected, actually say, hey, Kieran, what happened last night? They would ask me, and I don't have to be like, oh, I didn't do it. I'd feel guilty. I'd actually end up doing it that night. And it worked all the way through to then leading to that sort of 14 kilos, which, if I can be really frank, I'm pretty proud of myself to do. And I hope that's not arrogant. I didn't think I'd be able to do it, but here we are.